It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Well, you're tuned into your Feel Good Breakfast Show. Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, we're back with Ashleyanne, and we're talking about how you can whip your CV into shape for 2017. I think it's a very important task. People take for granted, you know, once you sit down to update your CV, that it can be a little bit of a daunting task. Now, already earlier you mentioned we need to strip down, get rid of all the unnecessary information, but now it's time for us to also build it back up. Where do we start?
You start with details. Unfortunately, a lot of people omit relevant details from their document. They'll instead fluff up their document with lots of descriptive words, lovely adjectives, but those adjectives really are self-descriptors, and they don't really explain what it is that you actually did. So what you want to do is really put back into that document relevant details. If you're a manager, how many people do you manage? If you're responsible for a budget, how big is that budget? If you are working in IT, what softwares are you working with? What hardware are you working with? How big is the environment? Those kind of relevant details that paint a picture of the size and the scope of the environment that you're in, how big, how much responsibility you really have. Don't take it for granted that the job description says exactly how big your environment it is. It doesn't, because large companies use the same job titles as small ones do. So you need to paint a realistic picture for employers as to how big or small that environment was and how much responsibility you really had.
Okay, and then when it comes to your actual CV, I know a lot of people have the summary. How important is it to have a little bit of a summary?
I think the summary was 1980s. So since we're talking about 2017, let's pull it up a little bit here and go a little bit more modern and a little bit better, actually. That summary was repeating a lot of stuff that we already knew, or the objective I'm applying for. We know you're applying for it because you sent your application in. So instead, we really recommend that you put in a value proposition statement. And what that is it's 3 or 4 points about you that relate to how you would be a good candidate for that job. And what you're going to do is you're going to back those up with actual detail regarding how you think you have that quality. So let's say it's communication that you need to have. You would list then underneath that header, you would list a couple points about how you're a good communicator. Be specific. Don't just leave it to vague generalities. If there was a challenging situation that you were in that you were able to overcome, list that. Just state it briefly and concisely.
Okay, and then how important it is, so let's talk about relevant information. So if I just finished high school, you could then, mention, I was netball captain, did part of the swimming team, but I'm, for example, sitting here right now, I'm not in high school, I'm after varsity, so those details are not relevant anymore. How do you make that call?
10 years is a good rule. If it was older than 10 years, it's really not as relevant. You can still list it, but I would list it under a previous experience and don't give any description to it because it's going to take up room on the document. You really want to try to keep to 2 pages if you can. So 10-year rule of thumb is your great benchmark, but also if it's not going to bring up one of the keywords from the job description, then it's not really something that the employer initially is looking for. Include that kind of information on your LinkedIn summary or some other location where they can get supporting information. But the CV is a 2-page marketing document that's selling you for that particular position. It shouldn't be a career history. It's not every detail about you. It's just 2 pages related to that particular job.
Okay, and should you add your social media, addresses, your handle, so they can check it out?
You can. If you have taken the time to make sure that your social media is personal marketing for you, and it's not a personal site that you'd like to share with friends, then go ahead and add the handle. Link it. I highly recommend people get involved on LinkedIn. Recruiters are looking for people on LinkedIn. Fill out that LinkedIn profile and put the LinkedIn address to it. It allows you to have a little bit more space to talk about those things that maybe you didn't have room for in the 2 pages.
Oh, well, Ashleyanne, thank you so much for joining us this morning, giving us that great insight, and hopefully you were able to take some great tips and be able to put your CV into shape for 2017. Well, it is now that time of the morning for us to catch up with the morning headlines.